And it leads to lots of interesting questions. How do you do that? How do you measure across the on-chain and off-chain?
What's the pain point that the solution of combining these two address? And how does it work?
I think certainly for mobile apps, you have the entire flow of mobile attribution and everything, which AppsFlyer has been doing for a very long time. You're running campaigns on whichever network that you choose to run campaigns on. You see the clicks from those campaigns, you see the installs from those campaigns, and they're all attributed to the specific campaign that the user clicked on. And that's AppsFlyer's bread and butter. That's what they've been doing for a very long time. But now with the blockchain side of stuff, you have the ability to sell the NFTs on the likes of OpenSea, that kind of thing, which I think gives a whole new dynamic to how it's measured. And, potentially somebody could buy an NFT or buy an asset for a game before they've even installed the game, which I'm sure probably happens now.
Sure. Yep.
Because most games that I've seen have almost started a fundraising round with some of the assets and selling the assets off within the game.
Yeah, I mean, that's a great point, Adam, right? That look, Web2 is never going away, right? And people are going to be buying inventory on regular web, Facebook, Google, whatever. AppsFlyer will have a healthy, booming business for a very long time. But then Web3 introduces weirdnesses that just completely break with the Web2 paradigm as we've known it. There's no two ways about it. You've got to build a different way of thinking. What you cited is a perfect example, right? In which you've got what we call a Web3 event that happened on chain, which is actually the top of funnel event, right? Which is, they minted the NFT or they got the airdrop. Oh, and then by the way, they also clicked on the Facebook ad, which maybe you're measuring through AppsFlyer, and then the user converts. And it's so which is it? Who do we credit? It would be misattribution to only attribute one or the other side of it, which is why you have to see both. That's
But where, in your experience, where would that be attributed to? Effectively, is that attributed to OpenSea because the user's gone there, they've purchased the NFT from there, and then subsequently they've installed the game?
How'd they get to OpenSea?
That's one of the mysteries of the universe.
Well, Discord community that you created early on.
Potentially, right. I mean, the answer, it depends which dashboard you look at. And you're only going to get the right answer if you look at both sets of data. It's really the hard answer. And it's not just that. I mean, the other thing, to name examples, Proof of Play did a thing with Boombit. And it was a collaborative thing, by the way. It's not hostile targeting. But if you had a certain NFT from Proof of Play, they would actually drop you something on the Boombit side, or maybe it was vice versa. Maybe I'm forgetting. But either way, you've got a special cohort of users, which is the people that we targeted this thing to, that's a function of their outside behavior. And again, in Web2, there's no analog for that. I wouldn't be able to tell, the user did thing X and app Y and I'm app Z, so I need to measure it. It's it doesn't exist, right? That tool doesn't exist. Again, they come at it with the expectation from the Web2 world, but you just have to ingest it and present it in a different way. Look, there's this other top of funnel touch point, which again, came on chain. And in the ideal world, and we've had this happen, the user doesn't even know where the data came from. They don't even know if it's a mobile event that got fired through AppsFlyer or if it is an on-chain thing. They just see it as a touch point, and the identity system kind of keeps it all in sync. And then they just see a funnel and it all just magically works on a good day, except that it doesn't work that way. But that's the idea. And I think that's the world that games are going to be in. It's it's really just an implementation detail. Did I get it from the AppsFlyer SDK by firing a certain event? Or did the user do the thing on chain and then Spindl indexed it? It kind of doesn't matter at the end of the day. You just see it in the same funnel.
You're kind of completing the out-of-app event, ultimately, if that's what it is.
It's exactly right.
So guys, I think what might be helpful here is maybe present a use case. And let's just talk it through what the marketer experience would be for this use case. So I'm going to pick one of the games that we have in soft launch right now that I'm really excited about, which is Guild of Guardians by Immutable. It's a mobile free-to-play game. We have soft launch in Canada. And right now, the free-to-play economy is online, transactions passing to AppsFlyer as expected. And then in coming weeks, the Web3 economy will flip on as well, and we'll have those transactions as well. So in this hypothetical situation, mobile free-to-play with both on-chain and traditional free-to-play economy, maybe can you just talk us through, okay, I'm a marketer. If I'm working on this game, what do I log into? How do I see the data connected to each other? How am I thinking about results in a use case such as this? And there's a role that both data sets obviously play in this journey. So we bring the user in through a traditional free-to-play mobile campaign.
Yep.
What are they going to see in AppsFlyer? And then Antonio, maybe you can chime in with where Spindl is taking the handoff if in this use case they were using Spindl.
This is really quite simple. You would see effectively all of the campaigns that you're running. You would see the installs that you've had from those campaigns, just like you would on any mobile application. I think the difference here is the integration with Spindl. At the moment, we don't have data coming this way from Spindl. So all of the attribution data that we have, we pass through to Spindl. And Spindl are then able to show that alongside the out-of-app events, if you like.
Right. Just talking through the user journey. So the user comes in through an ad, a traditional AppsFlyer attribution occurs, and then to get the complete picture, this is now passing through to Spindl. So Antonio, now at Spindl, you're inheriting that AppsFlyer data in real time and talk about what comes next.
Yeah, so the way you turn this on, if you're an AppsFlyer client, like literally go to your AppsFlyer experience, and there's a thing called the Partner Marketplace, which is in the left-hand nav. And there, AppsFlyer has basically every partner company that matters in ad tech, like literally everybody you can name. Enter Spindl, Spindl appears. If you hit the talk to Spindl, I'll get an email. The other one is configure your Spindl integration. And basically, it's like a server-to-server postback, just to use a scary term of art for a second. And what that means is either we send SP underscore NFT underscore mint to AppsFlyer, right? And then that feeds into your AppsFlyer feed, or AppsFlyer AF underscore app underscore install, whatever the event is that happened on the mobile side, gets fired into our side like a postback in the same way that you would potentially fire AppsFlyer events to Segment or to App11 or anybody else in this whole data ecosystem that we're all part of. And then again, you could see it inside Spindl. You'll see like, oh, attributed users by ad network according to AppsFlyer, because again, AppsFlyer does all the mobile side of things. And then on our side, you might see, oh, like here's the actual on-chain revenue by that channel. We're effectively glomming on to the AppsFlyer attribution and saying, oh, by the way, this NFT revenue does correspond to just Facebook, to pick an example. AppsFlyer actually said this user came from Facebook. We said this user generated this much on-chain revenue, and together you have the full picture, right? That's how the data comes together. And again, it could be either inside a Spindl dashboard, it could potentially be inside AppsFlyer, or if you're a large gaming studio, it typically goes to your own BI backend, and then you can munge it however you want there.
Great. And on that last point, Antonio, do you guys already have like an API available through Spindl, or is that something in progress if people want to take this merged data flow into their internal BI?
Yeah. I mean, it's usually so much data that an API is too heavy. Usually it's just like an S3 bucket export. But yeah, we do whatever data exporting you need in very standard ways to do it. And then one last comment, people might be wondering, like, how does it work on the implementation side? It's very simple. Again, you either have the AppsFlyer SDK, which almost every game developer does, because of course they do. And then in our case, we do have a mobile SDK. Ours is very simple. Again, this is like the magic of the blockchain vision. All AppsFlyer and Spindl need to do is agree on a user ID across the two users. And then you don't need to, you can fire events and tests if you want, but really all we need to do is sync on an ID. We read the blockchain, AppsFlyer looks at what's going on mobile. And again, on the back end, it kind of magically joins, and then you can see the world of data.
In regards to BI and that kind of thing, if you're exporting, generally you would export from AppsFlyer, you'd export from Spindl, and then marry the two up within your BI platform.
Yeah, exactly.
Got it. And Antonio, I want to kind of double back to that last point about the lack of a need to identify every on-chain event. I think that's quite important, because to back up a little bit, like our team at Upptic, we've been working at this intersection for a year or more, but we've been working with a lot of like duct tape solutions. So like one of our partners is a large blockchain, and their main KPI is just the number of on-chain transactions driven or the number of daily active wallets. It kind of varies, but it's all based on on-chain data. But we're scaling them through their games, many of which are mobile. And so it's this weird thing of like, historically, we've had to have the developers map like, hey, when you do the thing in your game that does a blockchain transaction, put in an AppsFlyer event or put in an adjust event, whatever MMP they're using. And so we have this hacked together solution that's proxying in the MMP data. And that's okay, but there's a few issues with it. One of which is, to a Web3 native company, that's not a source of truth. It's like, well, okay, I understand that the dashboard says that, but our data source is the blockchain. This isn't even coming from on-chain. This is just coming from inside the game and something that's mapped there. So it might seem like this topic is like really in the weeds, but I think this is extremely important for like a large segment of the games that are coming to market this year.
I often get asked, like, who's your competition? And in reality, on desktop, the competition is usually using something like Amplitude or Mixpanel, and they literally fire the wallet address when they get it as like a custom event into the front end. And then if they're really out there, they'll try to do what we just said, which is like try to reproduce the blockchain, like double entry bookkeeping, but then have the client side try to fire events, which, as we all know, is never really fully reliable, and it isn't the system of record. And then they'll run like a query on chain and then try to stitch it together. Something like, you can sort of build a really rough hack together Spindl, but it never really works. And it's always kind of a mess. Or like what you said, which is you'll fire a wallet address as like a CUID into AppsFlyer or something. Like the reality is, if the blockchain is a system of record and like you're actually taking value there, like that is literally how like a lot of user acquisition budgets are literally took. It's like that is the system of record. You need to index a system of record, right? Index things in the system of record native to that ecosystem. If it's mobile, AppsFlyer, if it's on-chain Spindl, run it that way. And then make sure that the identity layer joining the two kind of works such that you're actually looking at reality.
I'm really interested how this data gets utilized. So obviously when you have an app install and then you're calculating ROAS or you're calculating the lifetime value of the player, that kind of thing, are the companies that you work with incorporating the off-chain? If the user goes and purchases it on OpenSea beforehand and then installs, are you incorporating that into their LTV, or how does that work?
In most projects we talk to, everyone aspirationally wants to do that. No one is practically set up to do that yet. That's at least what we see.
Yeah, does that in turn, really sorry, does that in turn like muddy the waters of LTV when you're purely looking at user acquisition and the return on user acquisition?
Well, I mean, it's not clean on mobile either, because on iOS you have scan at ATT, so it's not like there's nowhere the data is perfect.
Or cross PC to desktop.
But it's more egregious in blockchain, right? Because like in theory, the blockchain is the common ledger. Like the data is there. Just the data info is so poor that it's hard to actually index it in a way that makes it usable, which again is Spindl's challenge. But yeah, Adam, the short version is this some of the weirdness of Web3 that just doesn't exist in Web 2, which is why like Web 2 native solutions will always be kind of a hack, which is I can see if my user did this other thing, even if I didn't instrument the site, like OpenSea, like we're not firing pixels or anything on OpenSea, but if the user actually converted through it, we can still see that. You know, similarly in a slightly more competitive vein, if I see that they're using a competing app or a competing DeFi protocol or something, I can also see that, and everyone understands those are kind of the ground rules. Also, other interesting things like we work with YGG, right, which is a big gaming guild, and they work with Axie. We measured their downstream lift, which is again a question like I was at Facebook. We could never ask a Facebook like, what is the lift that we generated for Walmart? It's like, how would you even answer the question without even like working with them and doing a whole study?
Yeah.
In this case, in a very what's called permissionless way, meaning we just go like YGG instruments its own little questing site, its own mobile app. And they know like, okay, we drove whatever X% of Axie Infinity's revenue this month. And they just know that. And so there's a lot of new interesting measurement challenges in Web3 that, again, you can't solve in Web 2 due to the nature of it. But we're only just getting to the point of enabling all the cool stuff that you're talking about. Like, we're not really there yet, unfortunately.
Yeah, makes a lot of sense.